If you're someone who feels like $395 every month for Medicare is too expensive, then you've come to the right place, because in this video, I'm going to compare the 3 Medicare options that are extremely popular with people who are budget conscious. And the reason why I'm making this video is because so many people here on YouTube try to sell you this idea that a Medicare Supplement Plan G is the only good Medicare plan. But depending on the state that you live in, a Plan G can easily cost you hundreds more per month, and it keeps rising. Twice a year sometimes the cost goes up. And it pains me to see people cutting out essentials like food, their groceries, prescription drugs, or pet food, or any enjoyment of life because they can't afford anything other than their Medicare plan. The truth is, you do have low-cost Medicare Advantage and low-cost Medicare supplement options available to you. So let's look at what those options are. And first, let's start with a plan that you might not have heard of before. It's the Medicare Supplement High Deductible Plan G. Yes, a high deductible Plan G. People say, oh, why would I want a high deductible? Well, let me show you how it works, because some people really want it. The high deductible version of the Plan G works differently than its cousin, the traditional Plan G. With a traditional Plan G, let's say that you pay something like $150 a month. Well, you also pay the $257 deductible, and then you have no out-of-pocket for the rest of your stuff, minus prescription drugs, of course, for the rest of the year. But with the high deductible Plan G, you pay a much lower premium than the $150 a month. Now, the exact price depends on your age and which state you live in, but it's not hard to find plans that range as low as, say, $40 to maybe $70 a month. So you see this and you say, oh wow, it's already a lot less expensive, but what's the catch? Well, the catch is that you have to pay a pretty big deductible before your coverage kicks in. In 2025, the deductible is $2,870. So right now, it's $2,870. It goes up for inflation every year, but that's how much you have to pay. And after you pay that, then there's no network, there's no prior auth, there's no drug coverage either, and there are no perks, but it doesn't have all these extras. But once you hit that $2,870, you don't have to pay anything else for the rest of the year. So let's give an example. Let's say that you go to the doctor and your doctor charges you $1,000. Medicare will pay 80%. Your plan doesn't pay anything yet. This continues until you spend $2,870. Now, I know $2,870 sounds like a lot, but remember that traditional Medicare Plan G costs you $150 a month. So you're already paying $1,800 just to have the plan. This is a really rosy $150, by the way. I mean, if you live somewhere like New York, you're paying like $300-400 a month, right? But anyway, the point is that you're going to pay $1,800 just to have the plan if you have a Plan G, at a minimum, probably more, where with the high deductible plan, you're going to pay much, much, much less. Right here, we're looking at $480 a year. So the high deductible plan really becomes expensive if you're really sick, if you get hospitalized a lot, if you have a major health problem or a health scare or cancer or a heart attack or something, or you're going to the hospital multiple times, right? These things will push you up to spend that $2,870. Now think about this. The $2,870 is what you pay when you're paying 20% and Medicare is paying 80%. So it is hard to get there, but you have to spend that before your plan kicks in. Once your plan kicks in and you've spent the $2,870, it covers the rest for the rest of the year, minus, of course, prescription drug coverage. That is not included in your high deductible Plan G, just like it's not included in a regular Plan G. So even though a high deductible Plan G is different from a traditional Plan G, it has a lot of the same benefits, as in no network. You can go to any doctor that takes original Medicare. Also, like a Plan G, traditional Plan G, no prior authorizations. Well, with the exception of a few things that are coming into original Medicare. I made a video about that. If you haven't seen my video about prior authorization coming to original Medicare, there are some states that are doing a trial in 2026 where they're going to bring prior authorization for some services to original Medicare. But in general, and that's a Medicare thing, that's not a supplement thing. The supplement still will not have prior authorization, which will set it apart from some of the other things we're going to talk about here. So as long as your doctor takes original Medicare, they will take your high deductible plan. And with the prior authorization, because you're on a Medicare supplement plan, you don't have prior authorizations from your insurance. Like I said, there are some states that are testing this for Medicare. But most of the time, if your doctor says, hey, you need that treatment, they can just bill Medicare and you're done. This is unlike Medicare Advantage plans where we know you have to request. So I'm going to jump ahead because we're going to talk about 2 Medicare Advantage plans. We already know over there, yes, there will be prior authorization when we get to those. So that's a standout difference in doing a high deductible Plan G. Now, since the high deductible Plan G is a supplement plan, like I said, no drug coverage. It does not cover prescription drugs. You have to enroll in a separate prescription drug plan. There are plans available in many areas that are $0 a month. Those aren't good for everyone. It depends on your medications, but in some cases you can get your RX coverage at a $0 premium, but that's not available to everyone. So you kind of have to look and see what's available in your area. Now, another thing that we know this does not do is it does not cover, I call it perks here. Perks meaning dental care, vision care, eyeglasses, hearing aids, that sort of thing. The things that you think of for dental, vision, and hearing, as well as gym memberships, transportation benefits, and those other types of perks that a Medicare Advantage plan often has, you're not going to find in a high deductible. You're not going to find in a high deductible Plan G, I should say. So in a nutshell, high deductible Plan G is a great option for people who want to have the flexibility of a Medicare supplement plan, but they can't afford the traditional premium. The way it works, honestly, is that you probably, if you're healthy, you're not going to hit your maximum out of pocket every year. Now, when people do tend to get sick as they age, I mean, there's only one way out of this life, right? We all are going to punch our ticket the same way. But while you're healthy, you are saving. You're saving a lot of money. So is it reasonable to say, well, over the next 3 to 4 years, I am going to be healthy, and so I'm going to save the money that in year 4 or 5, I end up spending on the deductible? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, you can see almost any doctor or hospital, and you don't have to worry about prior authorizations or paying for very expensive monthly premiums. So you can see how the high deductible Plan G is a good option for people that are crunched on the budget, but want that flexibility of a Medicare supplement plan. Now let's talk about the most popular Medicare plan today, and arguably the plan with the lowest cost overall in most places, and that's the Medicare Advantage HMO plan. HMO stands for Health Maintenance Organization. Well, that sounds nice. An organization that is designed to maintain my health. Okay, well, clever name. Anyway, when it comes to these plans, you'll find a lot of them that have a $0 monthly premium. In fact, most people on a Medicare Advantage HMO are in a $0 monthly premium. This is a far cry from $150 a month for a Plan G, and even the $40 to $70 for the high deductible Plan G. And again, I was doing this at age 65, so let's say that right now. That's for a lot of places at age 65, not everywhere, but most people are paying much more for their Plan G than that. But you can see that this is a lot less expensive, and that attracts a lot of people. Now, a Medicare HMO plan often are kind of a pay-as-you-go type of plan, meaning that as you visit your doctor, you usually have to pay a copay. If you go to the ER, there's a copay for that. If you're admitted at the hospital, there's a copay for that. So you'll find that the HMO costs money when you use it. However, many of those prices can be very reasonable, especially on an HMO plan, but not always. You have to see what's available in your area. But here's an example. Let's say you're visiting your doctor. It might cost $0 to $10. If you're going to the ER, maybe it's $50 to $75. If you're admitted to the hospital, maybe $0 up to $300 a day for 3 or 4 days. It's stuff like that. And then after that, $0 when you're staying longer. These are examples, but every plan sets their own prices, and you have to look at what's available in your area. If you live in an area with lots of seniors, you'll probably have better plans. If you live in a rural area with not a lot of healthcare options, it's going to be a more expensive plan. That's just kind of how it goes all across the country. Now, all HMO plans have a maximum out-of-pocket limit. This is the most that you can spend for the year before your plan takes over and pays the rest. Unlike a high deductible G, which has a fixed $2,870 limit, Medicare Advantage plans all set their own maximum out-of-pocket. And I want to point that this is a deductible, which is different than a maximum out-of-pocket. A maximum out-of-pocket is your worst case scenario. So instead of saying out-of-pocket, I'm going to put this max, because we're talking about the worst case scenario, max out-of-pocket, not deductible. Even though this is a deductible, with a high deductible G, your maximum out-of-pocket and your deductible happen to be the same. But remember, with the Medicare Advantage HMO, it won't be like that. Your Medicare Advantage HMO may have a deductible, But that's different than your maximum out of pocket, because your maximum is after you've paid a lot out of pocket. So most HMOs, general range is, anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000. This is kind of your average-ish. But the problem is that we know of areas that have plans that are like $700 maximum, $700 worst case scenario, and we know of places that have an $8,000 maximum. So it really depends on what's in your area. But this gives you an idea, because this is what the sort of the average is. What about networks? Now, Medicare Advantage HMO plans, they are known for having strict networks. You're going to have a network. You're going to need to go to your primary care doctor, and they will refer you to specialists. HMOs are particularly strict about this. They're not going to cover you if you go out of network, unless it's an emergency. In an emergency, no matter where you are, you'll be able to use an ambulance, you'll be able to be taken to the hospital, you'll be covered for the ER, for a hospital stay. All those things are going to be covered in an emergency. So it's not as big of an issue to have a network sometimes as some salespeople try to make it sound. Because if the doctors that you want to see are in that network, then it's okay. If you're traveling, you will be safe, because you'll be able to go to any doctor or hospital in an emergency. However, if your doctor is not in the network, if your doctor leaves the network, then it becomes a problem, right? This is the big trade-off. Do I want to have a network to have the lower cost plan? And for a lot of people, they say, yes, I'm willing to take that risk, and if I have to, I'll get a different doctor, because I just can't afford these rates. But that is the big trade-off. The place where I see that networks is a problem usually is in rural areas. If you live in a rural area and there aren't a lot of providers, meaning doctors around you, there aren't a lot of hospitals around you, that can be a real challenge. And we experienced that in my own family. I had one of my family members was on an HMO in a rural area and had chosen that because of the lower cost option. But when he needed to go into rehab, into a skilled nursing care, that was a problem, because the nearest skilled nursing facility that he was able to get into was almost 3 hours away. So you've got to consider that network thing. And if you're in a rural area, then that's the challenge, and that's what you're going to face. Now, speaking about prior authorizations, yes, we know that's going to be in all the Medicare Advantage plans. But this is another thing that people who try to sell Medicare supplements and push Medicare supplements, again, Medicare supplements are right for a lot of people. But if someone's pushing it at you, this is probably what they're saying. Oh, prior authorizations. You're never going to get anything covered. They're going to deny everything. They just make it sound like you're never going to get anything approved. But in a recent study by the Kaiser Family Foundation, or KFF, they found that only 6.4% of prior authorizations requests were denied. They also found that 81% of appeals were overturned. So how often is this a problem? Well, it's a problem about 6% of the time. Now, we say it's a problem, but is it reasonable to say that, and then 6% of the time, if you appeal that, it's overturned, and 80% of the time it is then approved. So roughly we're looking at 2% of the time is really how often prior authorizations prevent something from being done. 2%, is it reasonable to say that 2% of the time it's probably unnecessary and it's a hypochondriac wanting something that's really not necessary? Yeah, most of the time that's probably the case. But if that isn't the case, or if you have to go through an appeal, that can be incredibly frustrating. And so that's something that comes along with this low-cost plan. How does it stay low cost? Because there is something akin to gatekeeping to prevent abuse of the system and to prevent people from having expensive procedures that are unnecessary. And if you don't want to have that gate, then you've got to pay the money to avoid that gatekeeping. Okay, what about prescription drug coverage? Most Medicare Advantage plans include prescription drug coverage, and you cannot buy and will not buy a separate prescription drug plan for that. If you sign up for a Medicare Advantage HMO or PPO plan, and that plan does not have drug coverage, you cannot get drug coverage from a standalone prescription drug plan. Maybe you could have it from the VA, or maybe you have it from retiree services or some other place, but you can't get it from Medicare. So you have to look at that and say, if I need drug coverage, which most of you do, and I'm taking an HMO or PPO, I need to choose the one that has drug coverage in it. And in almost every area in the country, you're going to find a Medicare Advantage HMO or PPO that includes drug coverage. Lastly, we have the perks, or the extra benefits. Most Medicare Advantage plans on the HMO side have a ton of extra benefits like dental, vision, hearing, gym memberships, transportation benefits, flex cards, groceries, many, many more. You have to qualify for some of those things. Some of those things are based on need, are based on health or conditions. But what I would say about these extra benefits is be careful. Don't choose your plan just based on your extra benefits. That's a bad idea. Some people are like, oh, how much is the dental? Well, wait a minute. What does it cost when you use it? What is the network? How much is it going to cost you when you fill your prescriptions? The core benefits, I call them, that is where you need to focus your attention. And if you have two plans that are kind of, half a dozen one way and six the other, then let's look at the perks. But don't choose based on extra benefits alone. That can be a really bad idea. Okay, so you can see how the Medicare Advantage HMO can be really competitive, and that's why insurance companies are always trying to offer bigger and better plans for their enrollees to get attention and to get membership. And that's why these plans are far more popular than Medicare supplement plans today. They are by far the most popular type of Medicare plan today. But if you can afford a $150 to $300, I'm going to say $150 to $300, depending on where you live, and it could be more, $300 premium, then you could choose this route. If you can't, look at the high deductible Plan G and add a prescription drug plan. If that doesn't make sense, okay, then look at the Medicare Advantage HMO. If that doesn't make sense, then let's get over to our third one, which is the Medicare Advantage PPO. Because one of the main concerns that people have with the Medicare Advantage HMO is that if you go out of your network, you're not covered except in an emergency. However, this other type of Medicare Advantage plan lets you do that. It's called the Medicare Advantage PPO plan. PPO stands for Preferred Provider Organization. That means that there are some preferred providers in the organization, preferred providers in the group, and those get the in-network prices. And the in-network prices, that's what you're going for. And sometimes that's a really broad network. In some cases, becoming more rare now, but in some cases, there are PPOs with broad national networks. That is kind of going away. I mean, we're having a hard time right now in 2020, going into 2026. A lot of PPOs are disappearing or don't have the benefits that they used to have or just going out of business altogether. It's been kind of a tough year for PPOs, but let me explain to you the PPO option, and of course, you have to look and see what's available in your area. We can help you with that. If you're not sure, we can look it up, but it can be a good idea depending on what's happening, because recently, like I said, some of the PPOs have gotten a bit more expensive. But PPOs, again, are free to set their maximum out-of-pocket limits. The government sets some standards and says you can't go over this certain limit, but the limit's high. And what we find is that the maximum out-of-pocket on a Medicare Advantage PPO will usually be higher than what we see on a Medicare Advantage HMO. So with the PPO, you could see a maximum out-of-pocket that's more like $4,000 to $7,000. As kind of your benchmark for a PPO. It's going to be much higher than the Medicare Advantage HMO. And you'll also find that there is a network. Yes, there is a network, but it's also a yes and a no. There isn't a network that you go to, but you can also go outside of the network. So it's not as strict as the HMO. But when you go out of the network, you're going to pay higher prices, and you'll also have a higher maximum out of pocket for out-of-network things. So you really have to look at that and say, if my doctor is not in the PPO network, then I really should look at the Plan G or the high deductible Plan G if I can't find a network that has my doctor. Because going out of network on a PPO is very expensive. And I've been telling people this for like 15 years now. Really, the decision you should make is between these plans. If you're thinking about the Medicare Advantage PPO, maybe instead of that, you should be looking at the Medicare Supplement Plan. And if you're going to go all in to say, I want the extra benefits, I want the lower cost plan, monthly, etc., then go to the Medicare Advantage HMO. In a lot of parts of the country, that makes a lot of sense because it's two ends. And if you're trying to hit it in the middle, I like the high deductible G over the Medicare Advantage PPO because it has the benefit of no network and it can be pretty reasonable on the price. So that's the way I look at it. I think it's a decision between two ends, and the Medicare Advantage PPO oftentimes doesn't fit that well in the middle because the Plan G high deductible is what I think is in the middle. However, these PPOs still are popular. Millions of people have joined a Medicare Advantage PPO. Okay, what about Prior authorization, we talked about that. Yes, it will have prior authorization. What about drug coverage? Yes, that's a perk compared to the high deductible Plan G. It does include prescription drug coverage in many cases. Of course, you have to look at the ones in your area because there are a lot of PPOs on the Medicare Advantage side that were built for veterans, that are built around the idea that you have coverage through the VA and you're going to get your medications through the VA and you're going to get your health benefits through the PPO. So if you're a veteran, that's one of the times where a Medicare Advantage PPO can make a lot of sense, but that's because you have access to medications at the VA. If you don't have access to the medications at the VA, then you really need to get one that has the drug coverage. The last category was the extra benefits, and yes, these PPOs often have the same type of extra benefits that a Medicare Advantage HMO have. However, in most cases, they are going to offer fewer extra benefits. You know, I just realized I left out the big thing at the top up here. What do they cost? Well, there are some zero, but many that have premiums, and we'll say $0 to $75 a month, in that range, mostly on the lower end of that. But Medicare, it just depends on what's available in your area. Now, because of the rising costs of healthcare, PPOs have become a lot more expensive. And because they don't have control in the network, they're also more expensive for the insurance companies. And so it's harder for the insurance company without network control to control the costs. And so they're starting to get more expensive. And there are a lot of these PPO plans that were great last year that aren't so good in 2026 and are losing some of their extra benefits or going up in cost. The cost of going out of network with a PPO plan has also been increasing. So these things vary state by state, and there still are some places where the PPO is a good option, but not everywhere. So if you'd like to check what's available where you live, text or call us using the number on the screen, and one of our licensed insurance agents would be glad to help you at no cost to you. And one word of warning, remember that it's not easy to move from these low-cost plans to the Plan G, Medicare Supplement Plan. You can't just say, oh, I don't want my HMO or my high deductible G or my PPO, and I just want to go to the Plan G now. It's not like that. You have to medically qualify for the Plan G if you're past your 6-month window when you turn 65. So think clearly about this decision and be careful and make sure that you know what you want and that you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to do this for a few years, then I'm going to go to that. You need to know what you're doing and choose the right plan now because you might not be able to change later. And if you want the flexibility of a Medicare supplement plan without the high upfront costs, think about the high deductible Plan G. If you want the lowest possible cost and the most extra benefits and perks, then think about the Medicare Advantage HMO. And if you want the perks of an Advantage plan with a little bit more flexibility, then call us to find if there is a good PPO plan available in your area. Now, you've probably heard a few YouTubers just warning you against joining Medicare Advantage plans, but I'm telling you, some of these people are just flat out lying to you, and they're just trying to get you to sign up for one of these more expensive plans. I'll explain this more in the following video, so go ahead and watch that next.